Hello and a warm welcome to this webinar by Corstone and Sneha titled Post-Pandemic Roadmap to Resilience, Strengthening Mental Health Care for the Youth. Before the COVID-19 crisis, young people carry the burden of mental health conditions without significant investment in addressing them. The pandemic and the increase in depression, anxiety, and behavior problems. These are uncertain times with the threat of another variant possibly disrupting our lives. And at the same time, we have the opportunity to learn from these experiences and foster systems that promote mental well-being. Approaches for promoting positive mental health outcomes. I'm Shai Venkatraman, this webinar. Before I go on and introduce the speakers, we have a short video for you. This is of a few children and youth talking about the changes they have experienced over the last year after the pandemic came upon us.
लॉकडाउन का अर्थ तालाबंदी यानी कि घर में खुद को एकांत रखना, जिससे खुद को बोर फील होती है। शुरुआती लॉकडाउन में मुझे डर, निराशा, भय, क्रोध, उलझन जैसी मुश्किल भावनाएं है।
लेकिन मेरे अंदर पढ़ाई को लेकर निराशा, उलझन, चिंता जैसी भावनाएं मेरे मानसिक स्वास्थ्य पर प्रभाव डाल रही थी। फिर मुझे याद आया कि मेरे मानसिक स्वास्थ्य खराब होने से सामाजिक और शारीरिक स्वास्थ्य भी खराब हो जाएंगे। फिर मैंने बुद्धिमत्ता चारित्रिक गुण का उपयोग कर स्कूल के बदले घर पे बैठ कर पढ़ने लगी, जिससे मैं इस प्रकार मैं मुश्किल भावनाओं से निकली।
मैं जब अपने स्कूल पूरा करके मैं पार्ट टाइम जॉब के लिए अपने गांव से दूसरे गांव जाता था, तो जब देश भर में जब लॉकडाउन आया था तो पूरे स्कूल को बंद कर दिया गया। तो मेरे मालिक ने मुझे कहा था कि तुम कल से दुकान मत आना। तो ऐसी स्थिति में मैं क्या कर सकता था? तो ऐसी स्थिति में मैंने क्रोस्टोन के इससे 1 साल पहले मैंने कुछ कोर्स किए थे जिन्हें मैं कुछ सीखा था। उसके हिसाब से मैंने एक फेसबुक पेज बनाया। जिसके फेसबुक पेज बनाया तो मैंने उस पर लिखा कि जिसको भी इलेक्ट्रॉनिक का अपना एक होम सर्विस मतलब काम करवाना हो इलेक्ट्रॉनिक से रिलेटेड, उस पर हमको संपर्क करें और कांटेक्ट करें। अपने खुले विचार को करते हुए मैंने वो काम को स्टार्ट किया। आज वो काम मेरा बहुत अच्छा से चल रहा है।
So as you can see from this video, you have a lot of youth talking about what they experienced and at the same time how their coping mechanisms in a sense kicked in. Speakers, I would like to throw open a question to all our participants, to our panelists, and this is an important one, and that is, mental health is a clinical condition that requires attention, yes or no? It'd be great if you could share your feedback, a discussion point as we enter. To repeat the question, mental health is a clinical condition that requires attention, yes or no? Okay, as we wait for those responses to come in, let me start off and introduce our panelists today. Just by profession, who's vice. Corstone works in the area of emotional resilience. UP, Uttarakhand, Rajasthan, reaching over 2 lakh students and imparting training to over 5,000 teachers. We also have Neeta Karandikar, who's the Associate Program Director with Ehsaas, Sneha's Adolescent Health and Sexuality Program. Neeta has over 12 years of implementation and integration experience with leading nonprofits, and her expertise lies in issues of women, children, and youth from vulnerable contexts. Also joining us today is Saisha Manan. Saisha is a grants manager at Mariwala Health Initiative, an advocacy and grant-making organization in mental health. She is also a fellow of the Origin Global Youth Mental Health Advocacy Fellowship 2021. Apart from community-based mental health work, her interests include media analysis on issues of identity. And bringing us a very important, critical, on-ground perspective is Ravina Mattal. a community organizer with Sneha, deeply committed to the cause of children from vulnerable contexts. She has about 14 years of professional experience in the social sector, including her work with Pratham on educational support to children. We extend a warm welcome to our speakers who have years of experience in working with vulnerable communities and are deeply involved in mapping, responding to, directing, and monitoring ground-level responses to the pandemic's aftermath. Before we begin, here are some pointers for all our participants. Please type questions addressed to our panelists on the chat box. And due to time constraints, our speakers will be able to answer 2 to 3 questions orally. So I'm going to now, major impacts of COVID-19 was the fact that youth were completely denied any access to meeting people, to sharing experiences, which is really important, particularly for this age group. And that Cornerstone found in rural India, where the isolation in a sense was much more, the cutoff was felt much more deeply. How did you find it impacting youth in general, of course, but specifically within the rural settings where Cornerstone works?
Thank you, Shai. First of all, before I begin, on behalf of Cornerstone and Sneha, I would like to welcome all the participants who are here today. Thank you for attending the webinar. As we know, the pandemic, it's almost 2 years since we've been having this pandemic, and we all know what the impact it has had on mental health. So there's so much written about it. Everybody's talking about the impact of mental health. But today, actually, I hope the discussions can take us to a space where we're looking at what's the way forward? What can we do about it? So going to what Shai has asked, I would like to say that in our work, we have been trying to reach out to the students and the young people that we've been working with in the rural areas. And we have found that they have really suffered from the isolation that they have been witnessing. It's not just the isolation, but young people have been, their whole world has gone topsy-turvy. No friends, no schools, not able to contact people. And especially in the rural areas, there have been other difficulties. Men coming back, from the urban cities, they have been to witness violence in their homes. And then there's so much of isolation, as I said before. So this has been generally what young people have been facing in the rural areas.
I'll repeat that question. So if I could come to you now, Neeta, how did Sneha cope with this? How did you ensure that your outreach programs and your specific areas of intervention were not affected?
Yeah. As Gracie has said, there has been an issue with children being locked down. During the lockdown, they were not able to come out of the houses and they were not able to really meet with their friends. The restricted mobility, especially on girls, has been an issue. So when the pandemic was announced in March 2020, what we did was we took 2 days to collect the phone numbers of all our participants, all our adolescents and their parents. And we ensured that one child has at least got one call once in a week, so that we are able to communicate the correct information regarding COVID-19, because in the slum communities that time there was a lot of hype and misinformation regarding COVID-19 was also going through. So we used phone as a medium to keep in touch with them. We created this because conducting modular sessions was not possible physically. What we did was we conducted a video on emotional resilience, a Cornerstone emotional resilience module, and the video was made by their own peers. Like one of our youth facilitators only did that video, and we circulated that video through WhatsApp, through Google Meet, and we had calls with them, follow-up calls, in order to understand whether they have understood the messages and how they need to really focus on their emotional well-being and the mental health apart from their physical health, because lot was talked about immunity, building immunity and everything, but nothing was basically being focused initially in the pandemic time for the mental health issues. So that is what we did it. And also what being aware of emotional turmoil and mental health is been our priority. So we also conducted a qualitative study on understanding different stressors that these adolescents are going through. And we came to know that there are issues of restricted mobility, being not able to meet their friends, not able to really go out, and being locked in the cramped houses was really kind of creating a stress on them. Loss of job, loss of job, livelihood opportunity has been an issue. So we decided that we need to, normally we do a mental health screening for these adolescents, but we were not able to do it during the pandemic time. So what we did was we continued with the psychosocial support and counseling for these adolescents. So the clinical psychologists who are on board with us, they played an important role in being connected with these adolescents who have a mental health concerns and telling them how to take care of them. We also had an opportunity to work with an organization to offer art therapy sessions on phone and on WhatsApp calls, so that we were able to really be connected with them through all these mediums during the pandemic, when the pandemic was announced in 2020.
So those are some really interesting and unique interventions that Sneha designed. I'd also like to go back to our poll question and say that it's encouraging to see that most people believe that it is a clinical condition. Mental health is a clinical condition that requires attention. Now, I'd like to go to Ravina. Ravina Mattal, as I said, is a community organizer with Sneha, really in the thick of this impact. She witnessed it close at hand because she lives in the community and saw the impact that the lockdown and the cutoff from all sources of really interaction, education was having on the youth. Ravina, thank you. मैं आपसे पूछना चाहूंगी, आप कम्युनिटी में रहती हैं, आप मतलब जिन लोगों के साथ काम करती हैं, जो यूथ के साथ इन्वॉल्व हैं, बिल्कुल आपके करीब हैं, क्या देखा आपने जब अचानक मतलब पूरा ये जो एक्सेस था एजुकेशन का या बाहर जाने का, कुछ भी जो बिल्कुल बंद हो गया, किस तरह के डर, किस तरह के भय लोगों के साथ, बच्चों के सामने आ रहे थे, क्या कह रहे थे आपसे, वो क्या असर हुआ था इसका?
भारत में जब लॉकडाउन लगा तो बहुत सारे लोगों का घर में ही बंद हो गए थे, घर से बाहर नहीं जा पा रहे थे। छोटे छोटे घर में 6 से 7 लोग एक ही साथ में रहते थे। उनके जो टॉयलेट थे, सार्वजनिक टॉयलेट यूज करने की वजह से ज्यादा ये था कि बीमारी ज्यादा फैलेगी। इसके वजह से लोगों में डर हो गया और डर के मारे कोई लोग तो स्थलांतरित हो गए, गाँव चले गए। इसका असर ज्यादा करके हमारे युवकों पे बहुत हुआ था, क्योंकि उन्हें स्कूल कॉलेज बंद हुए थे। उन्हें जो दोस्तों के साथ बात करना, जो उनके साथ मिल जुलना, वो पूरा बंद हो गया था। हमारा जो सेंटर था वो बंद होने की वजह से उनकी सेफ जगह निकल गई थी और वो फिर अकेले हो गए थे। उन्हें जो भी दिक्कत हो रही है, जो भी लग रहा है, वो कहीं से बात नहीं कर पा रहे थे, नहीं बता पा रहे थे किसी को। वो पूरे इस तरह से टेंशन में थे बहुत से। इसका असर ये था कि वो हमारे यहाँ जब जो लड़कियां जो सेशंस के लिए आती थी, उन्हें भी किसी तरह से हमसे कांटेक्ट नहीं हो पा रहा था, इसलिए हमने मोबाइल लाइब्रेरी बच्चों को साथ में चालू किया।
So Ravina makes an important point here that apart from education, any kind of interaction being cut off, even access to something like the community toilet was something fraught with anxiety and danger for the youth, given that there was also so much misinformation or really lack of clarity about COVID, the spread of COVID and the fears of infection. And of course, you had terrible news reports of the fatalities all around us. And some of Sneha's interventions were smartphone libraries. We'll hear more about that from you, Neeta, going ahead in this webinar. And those sort of came into place to ensure that youth, particularly girls who, as we will discuss going ahead, were most impacted, and to some extent felt supported or felt that there was some source of communication for them. Sasha, I'd like to ask you now, even Mariwala Health Initiative's community intersectoral approach to mental health, how did that come into effect? How did that play out at this time to ensure that all the mental health needs, services were accessible to the youth?
Thanks, Shai. I think as my co-panelists and the youth that we've heard from so far today have already listed out, the pandemic and consequent lockdowns have had massive disruptions in the lives and well-being of youth in multiple ways. Through the work of MHI partners, we have found that community-based, cross-sectoral mental health programs were able to maintain accessible mental health services for youth, in part because organizations that were already embedded in the community and had built community leadership for mental health were able to respond the quickest and in the most integrated ways to the crisis of the pandemic. They were able to address mental health concerns as they were coming up, provide immediate relief needs, and also plan for long-term responses pretty much simultaneously. Their intersectoral understanding of mental health meant that the strong referrals and linkages networks that they had to connect communities with other services and supports apart from mental health continued to be active. Therefore, organizations have been able to address the psychosocial causes of mental health issues amongst youth in the past 2 years as well.
So one word that we're hearing a lot, in fact, even the youth in the beginning of the video spoke about emotional resilience, building emotional resilience. What do we understand by that? That's our next poll question, in fact, and I'd like to throw it open to everyone. These are the options we have. What do you understand by building emotional resilience? Do share your views about this. As we wait for the answers to come in, I'm going to go actually to one of the most vulnerable groups, in fact, have been girls. I mean, the impact of the pandemic, and this has been widely reported, documented, on the impact on girls of the pandemic has been much, much worse. And school closures, the economic stress all families faced, put vulnerable girls particularly at risk. In fact, we had a very critical, important study recently by leading mental health experts in India, which was published in the Lancet, which also pointed out that the suicide rate among Indian girls and women is much higher than it is twice, in fact, that of the global average. And there are many cultural and social factors that are associated specifically with increased suicide risk in women. How did these pressures play out? Before I announce the poll results, I'd like to play a video by Lakshmi Mishra, who's a youth volunteer with Sneha. She conducts group education sessions with adolescents on issues of mental health and nutrition, gender, and sexuality. Let's hear from Lakshmi about what her experiences were after the onset of the pandemic.
महामारी जब स्टार्ट हुई तो बहुत से कंडीशंस ख़राब थे, जैसे कि बाहर जाना नहीं था और राशंस भी कुछ घर में नहीं रहते। उस वक्त पे सब एक साथ एक ही घर में रहना, घर भी इतने बड़े नहीं थे कि हम सब एक साथ उसमें रह सके। धीरे धीरे तो कंडीशंस बहुत ख़राब होते गए। मुझे एक प्रैंक कॉल आ रहे थे, जिसके वजह से मैं ऑलरेडी पहले से मैं थी परेशान और उसके बाद मैं और परेशान होने लगी, जिसके वजह से मुझे एकदम बहुत गंदे गंदे मैसेजेस, गंदे गंदे कॉल आ रहे थे। हमारी के टाइम पे ऐसा सिचुएशन था, मैं ऑलरेडी पहले से डिप्रेस थी और उस पर और डिप्रेशन आते जा रहा था। तो जब ये ऐसा चल रहा था तभी मेरे को याद आया कि रुकैया दी इसके पहले मेरा वो ले रहे थे, काउंसलिंग ले रहे थे मेरा। मुझे रुकैया दी याद आई कि हाँ, इस वक्त मुझे रुकैया दी की ज़्यादा ज़रूरत है, तो मैं रुकैया दी से क्यों ना बात करूँ। तब से उन्होंने मेरी हेल्प की है और वो अभी भी बोलती है अगर कोई भी प्रॉब्लम है तो तुरंत मुझे याद करो। तो उन्होंने मुझे समझाया। पहली बात तो मैंने उनको कुछ उल्टा मैसेज किया नहीं था, तो मेरा गिल्ट तो था नहीं। जैसे ही मैंने जैसे रुकैया दी से शेयर किया, काउंसलर से शेयर किया, फ्रेंड्स से शेयर किया, तो वैसे ही धीरे धीरे मतलब वो मुझे ऐसा महसूस होने लगा कि हाँ, मेरी गलती तो थी नहीं, सच में मैं डिप्रेशन से जाने से बच गई। और भी ऐसा होगा तो जिसको अगर नीड होगी और जिसको ऐसा कुछ भी पता नहीं होगा कि उसको क्या करना चाहिए, तो मैं ऑलवेज सजेस्ट करूँगी कि हाँ, वो यहाँ पे स्नेहा से हेल्प ले सकते हैं।
So as we can see from Lakshmi's video, the stressors, the mental health stresses for girls are really quite different and may not always be things that immediately occur to us. रवीना, मैं आपसे पूछना चाहूंगी, आपने क्या देखा लड़कियों पे खासकर, किस तरह का असर, किस तरह के डर सामने आ रहे थे? जैसे लक्ष्मी बता रही थी फोन कॉल को लेके वो बहुत चिंतित थी, और वैसे भी घरों में पढ़ाई के बगैर, कॉलेज ना जाने के बगैर लड़कियों पे किस तरह के खासकर प्रेशर आए?
लड़कियों में था कि घर में सब होने के वजह से घर का जो माहौल था बहुत बिगड़ा हुआ था कि घर पे सब साथ में रहते थे, तो लड़कियों का घर का काम करना पड़ता था पूरे दिन में, उससे वो हिंसा हो रही थी उन्हीं के ऊपर। जो फोन थे उनके पास तो नहीं थे, भाई या भाई पापा के पास ही रहते थे, तो लड़कियों को फोन नहीं मिलता था, तो लड़कियों को तो फिर किसी से बात करना, किसी से शेयर करना बहुत मुश्किल हो रहा था। अगर हम लड़कियों को तो एक था कि आप लड़कियों हो तो फिर हमारे सर का बोझ है, इस कह कर गांव भी भेजा जा रहा था। हमें बताया जा रहा था कि उसे घर से मतलब इतनी छोटी उम्र में उसे शादी करवाना चाहते हैं। ऐसे हमें लड़की ने बताया कि जो मेरे बस्ती की लड़की उन्हें फोन करके मुझे बता दी थी कि मुझे मेरे मामा के गांव भेजा है, मुझसे जबरदस्ती शादी कर रहे हैं। तो जब मैंने उसको इसलिए मुझे बात बताई, तो मैंने उसको बताया कि आप काम करो, चाइल्ड लाइन हेल्पलाइन जो नंबर है 1098 उस पर कॉल करो, उनसे मदद लो। हम उस तरह से उन्होंने फोन करके उसकी मदद ली, और वो वहां से फिर उसको मदद मिलने के बाद अब वो बम्बई आ गई। ब्लैंक कॉल आते थे तो उसके ऊपर गंदे गंदे मैसेज आते थे लड़कियों को, इसके वजह से बहुत परेशान होते थे बच्चे। तो हमने उनको ये भी बताया था कि आप पुलिस को जाके कंप्लेंट कीजिए। इस तरह से लड़कियों के बहुत सारे अत्याचार होते थे घर में, एक ही घर में रहने की वजह से उन्हें पूरे घर का काम है, घर का तो उस पर उनको करना पड़ रहा था।
So as Ravina sharing with us the fact that they couldn't go to school, they couldn't go to college, may put the burden of the household work really on girls. They had to take on the burden of the household work. There was also the pressure of early marriage. Many of them were sent back to the village because the families were facing economic stress. And in one particular case, Neha had to intervene when a young girl was facing pressure to marry. Neeta, there must have been so many situations like this. How did Sneha ramp up its interventions, particularly for the girl child? You talked about smartphone libraries, also to training volunteers specifically to address the needs of the girl child. Can you talk about some of these interventions? What was the impact they had?
Yes. So Shai, what happened was when the pandemic started, we realized that the safety of the women and girls is going to be an issue. I think we could foresee that with our years of experience. So I would like to tell you that in the year 2020, I think we have received the maximum number of calls on our mental health helpline and also for the crisis helpline, because so far we were not really receiving so many calls on the helpline. Because women could not really come to the center, they used helpline as a method. So when we did the dry ration distribution, what we did was we wrote the handwritten messages with the information on: if you are facing a gender-based violence, use this helpline. If you are facing any mental health issue, use this helpline, and gave those messages to them so that they are able to access the support that they require during the pandemic time when when we were not working physically in our offices. Smartphone library was one of the initiatives where we ensured that the girls, because in our society there is a digital divide for girls. Girls do not really have a good access to smartphones, and suddenly everything, including the education and everything, went online. So for them to give that access to them, we created, with the help of the funders, we created this smartphone library where it's like a book library where you can come pick up the phone, and a lot of our volunteers have helped us to be the holders of the phone in the community, so they can go pick up the phone, use it for their education purpose or whatever, and return it back. We saw that many of the girls were using it because there were no phones available for them at home. Thirdly, I think that the sanitary pad as such was not listed as an essential item, so they were not available even in the medical shops. So we created this, we raised additional funds and created the sanitary pad distribution drive, in which, in order to break the taboo and shame and myths related to menstruation, we also used our boys volunteers who can who can go and talk to their mothers and women and give importance about sanitary health education. They initially said that it is like, we will not do it and those things, but later they realized that it is like any other sanitary health product, like a soap. So my mothers and sisters and everybody, all the women and girls in the community need it. So we have really used them appropriately. And as Ravina stated, the intervention in that case for stopping the child marriage, the community realized that Sneha has an eye on these kind of like events if they are taking up, and we really need to be very, very cautious about it. So what we have also done is we have used the 16 days activism campaign that we did just now to focus on prevention of early childhood marriages through different creative mediums.
Thank you for sharing. These are some wonderful instances of the resilience programs you had. And in fact, you had them even prior to the pandemic. What I would like to ask all of you is there any way you can share the impact? I mean, you've had these resilience programs even before the pandemic. Anything that to show that during the pandemic, in fact, these programs helped the youth cope better with all the, whatever the pandemic brought on them, the changes. Gracie, if I could ask you that first.
Sure. So although because there's no access to cell phones in the rural areas, it was difficult to actually do a proper survey. What we did was we did try to reach out to the young people, especially the girls that live in the KGBs, through their teachers. We tried to reach out to them to check how they have been coping during the pandemic. And we also asked some of the girls who had access to create some videos to kind of show how they've been coping. And so they were self-made videos that these young girls made about how they were using the skills of resilience that they learned during the session that they had before the pandemic, during the lockdown. And these were then put up on a website so that it can be an inspiration for other young people. So this is the kind of things that we saw on how young people use the skills during the pandemic.
Saisha, I'd like to ask you, in terms of MHI's interventions, how do you feel that some of them really sort of came into place during the pandemic and maybe helped support young girls particularly?
Sure. So I think one was definitely community building that had happened with young marginalized women to discuss what the issues would be sort of pre-pandemic, and even within the pandemic, that programs that were launched. I think as we saw an influx of attention on mental health, more and more people also started working, starting March 2020, on developing some sort of support systems within communities for different groups. And I think we've seen that having community support, peer support also, but even though connections to actually speak to one another maybe were more limited, that having reliance on those kinds of programs also was a huge mental health support.
Neeta, do you feel that Sneha's programs pre-pandemic really helped, in a sense, help the youth cope better? Did you see signs of that?
Yes, it has helped them to really cope with that better. And also, I think, Shai, the group education on COVID-19, emotional well-being and emotional resilience. The capsule that we created this time has really been helpful for all our adolescents to take care of their own mental health. Sessions like art therapy, that gives them an impetus in terms of how to use art in order to release my mental health stress and anxiety and depression and these things. The cases we used to do, the case management, we have now never done it through phone, but that we could do it this time. And that has really made the youth aware that there is support available for us even on phone. So that is how. And I think one more important intervention that we are trying right now is also building the cadre of barefoot counselors in the community, with the help of the youth who are like the non-specialist workers, as in who are not a clinical psychologist or a psychology people, but the community workers or the community youth who will be trained as first aid counseling skills or first aid psychosocial support. Those are needed. So in case if something like this, what forbid it does not happen, but it happens again. So they are available, and also during the night hours when the physical NGO workers are not available, it is important that they have this kind of a cadre available for them to talk to someone in case if they are facing any mental health issue.
So someone really at like a door's reach, someone you can just, someone's door you can
Yes.
knock on. That's
Yes,
wonderful.
yes.
That's really, really wonderful. In fact, really the best way to express or to, to show this resilience is through voices on the ground. We have a lovely video we wanted to share with everyone of a young girl called Harshita, shared with us by Safara Trust, Cornerstone partner at Dehradun. Listen to her. She talks about how she negotiated the challenges within her own home after the pandemic.
Hello everybody, my name is Harshita. I'm in Snehadun Academy and I'm in 10th standard. In my family there are 5 members, my father, my mother and my 2 brothers. So here's a small story of mine which I would like to share with you all. But just before that I would like to tell you something. Like we all talk about girls empowerment, women empowerment, equality between girls and boys. But do we all follow that in our lives? No, maybe some, but not everybody does it. Still, there is inequality between girls and boys. Girls are not treated as the boys are treated. There are a lot of discrimination done between girls and boys. So, in my family also, during this pandemic, during this coronavirus, I also faced a problem. Like I was not having a phone to attend my online classes and I was facing lots of problems in that. So when I told it to my father and he was like, okay, we'll buy a phone, but my brother had it, but he was like not ready to share it to me. So I convinced it to my father, but he was not being convinced by me. So when I interviewed it to director sir, he helped me and he convinced my father. So through this I came to know like there is not an equality between me and my brother. Still in some cases there is discrimination being done. So I learned through resilience classes that are being done in my schools that there should be equality between me and not just me but in every girl and boy. Everybody has a right to be treated as equal. So I took a stand for myself and just convinced my father to buy me a phone. So today I am having it, but just the message was that everybody must be treated equally. Everybody should have a right to be treated equally. Not just the girls and boys, everybody have the right to be treated equally. So thank you so much. Hello everybody, my name is Harshita.
That's a really lovely video of a young girl speaking up for herself, which is just such a wonderful, testament to the power really of enabling young people, girls in particular. I'd like to go on to our next poll question, which is what are some of the ways in which to build emotional resilience in youth? I'm throwing open the question, and while we get the answers, and Ravina, मैं आपसे पूछना चाहूंगी, ये जो हर्षिता बता रही थी देहरादून से कि कैसे घर के अंदर ही एक तरह से जो थोड़ा सा भेदभाव था, उन्होंने कैसे उसको कैसे कोप किया उसके साथ, इस तरह की एक्सपीरियंसेस क्या आपने भी सुने थे कि घर के अंदर लड़कियों के साथ एक तरह से डिस्क्रिमिनेशन हो रहा था?
हाँ, मतलब घर में लड़का लड़कियों में बहुत भेदभाव होता है। अगर लॉकडाउन था तो उस समय सभी घर पापा भाई बहन सब साथ में रहते थे। एक फोन होने की वजह से भाई को फोन मिलता था, लड़कियों को नहीं मिल रहा था फोन। वो चाहती भी हो तो भी नहीं मिल रहा था फोन। और घर में घर का जो भी काम है सब लड़कियां करती, लड़का या पापा को ही नहीं कर रहे। इससे डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस भी ज्यादा बढ़ गया है लॉकडाउन की वजह से।
तो ये इस सिचुएशन के साथ आपने कैसे हेल्प किया कोप करने के लिए?
हाँ, तो हमने फिर हमारा जो लाइब्रेरी एक्सेस जो चालू किया उसमें से हम लड़कियों को फोन देना चालू किया, उन्हें से कनेक्ट करने चालू किया। हम उनसे बातें करते रहे तो वो हमें फिर शेयर करती है कि हमें क्या दिक्कत हो रही, तो हम उस तरह से उन्हें काउंसलिंग के लिए हमारे जो काउंसलर है उनका नंबर देके उनसे बात करवाते थे।
So as Ravina sharing, as we talked about, okay, we have the results of the audience question come in. The above, that's the answer. Overwhelming number of people said 75% who believe that all of the above, which is early childhood interventions, providing skill building and development programs, and incorporating mental health education and activities in schools are needed to promote sound mental health in adolescents. So to go back to Raveena's answer, she talked about the burden, really, the unfair burden on young girls from not getting the cell phones. I mean, the boys getting priority, to the fact that none of the men of the household did anything, any of the household work, where the girls were expected to do it, in a sense, having to play a secondary role. These experiences were really heightened. And here Sneha's counselors actually stepped in to try to teach them how to cope with these challenges at home. So this is something is not new. This is not a pandemic posed situation that these, in a sense, inequities existed before, but during the pandemic, they really got heightened. Gracie, I'd like to ask you, what were some of Cornerstone's key approaches during the pandemic? In the sense, there were many mental health interventions that Cornerstone did in collaboration with the government. How did this partnership with the government prove to be an important one for Cornerstone?
Yeah, so Cornerstone has been working closely with the education department in Bihar to really take the residence program at scale. So we have been working and trying to kind of come up with the pathways of scale up in the KGBVs and the government schools. So when the pandemic happened and schools closed down, in response to the stresses that young girls and boys were facing, especially young girls, what Cornerstone did was, in the beginning, we actually created workbooks for the girls and boys. And these workbooks had certain worksheets related to the skills that they'd already learned. And in collaboration with the government, we got them distributed in the villages to the girls and boys, but mostly the girls from the KGBs. And they could actually use these worksheets to build on the skills that they had learned. We also did an orientation for teachers so that the teachers could actually then help these girls. So that the girls reached out to them, the teachers could support them in that process. Then at that point, the government, the education department came to Cornerstone and said, why don't you create some short videos that can be telecast on Bihar Doordarshan when the educational material is being telecast. So instantly, our creative team got together and created these 5 episodes with stories, that showing how the skills can be used during lockdown. And these 5 episodes were then telecast all over through the Bihar Doordarshan. What we also did, we reached out to teachers, a lot. We created well-being support meetings for the teachers. And during the last wave, when there's so much of death and devastation, we actually trained our staff. We got them to understand more about loss and bereavement, so that if teachers reached out to them, they could also tell them about it. So these are some of the things that we have been doing during the pandemic for our students.
Saisha, if I could, there are 2 parts to the question I'm asking you. One is that the structural determinants that impact girls have always been there. Yes, we've seen instances that, it got much worse during the pandemic. So if you could talk about that, how did you see, MHI witness that on the ground in your various programs? And 2, at the same time, now that we are confronted with this, does the pandemic also offer a roadmap to address this in a substantive way?
Certainly. So I think I'll repeat also, just to reiterate what my co-panelists have also said. We saw increased domestic violence. We saw increased issues of access to sexual and reproductive health and rights. We saw opportunities for education and employment slowly deteriorate and sort of disappear overnight at multiple levels for marginalized youth, including girls. And I think it'll be very apparent to anyone having worked in well-being in the past 2 years that a person's access to their rights, such as shelter, safety, education, health, livelihoods, all the things we've been discussing today, significantly impacts mental health. And it's necessary then to integrate mental health work across sectors and across issues if we are to truly respond to the needs of youth, right? If a young person's freedom of movement is limited due to gender restriction pre-pandemic, they may have since experienced compounded restriction, both at state levels and familial levels. So this will, of course, have had an impact on their opportunities to access education, employment, and many other things. And the pathways of support that they may have had access to, or strategies they may have had access to, also slowly started disappearing or were not as accessible or as functional. And I think moving ahead, this pandemic has primed organizations more so to the structural realities of the people that they work with. And it's an opportune moment for organizations to sort of restructure and reorient their youth mental health work to be more community focused, ecosystem focused, and start addressing these root causes so that we can facilitate greater access, integrated supports, and move towards stronger utilization of networks of supports that we can work with. Yeah.
So as Saisha's pointed out, the pandemic has brought mental health. It's out there. We are reading about this. More people are writing about their experiences. That's not to say that there's no stigma. There is stigma, but we really need to act now. And I'd like to go back to that study that I talked about earlier as we began this webinar, the Lancet. And here are some key data points from that study that I'd like to highlight before we talk about this with our experts. This is a study that was published, like I said, in the Lancet recently, titled The National Suicide Prevention Strategy in India, Context and Consideration for Urgent Action. And as you can see, of you who may not be able to, which is that India reports the highest number of suicide deaths in the world. It's the leading cause of death among Indians aged 15 to 39 years. And that's really grim, because you are talking about the most productive, the most, in the sense they are the economic future. And but the suicide, it is the leading cause of death in this particular age group. Among women and girls, it's increased from 27.3% in 1990 to 36.5% in 2019. And also among boys, it's increased as well. The same time period, it's risen from among men and boys from 16.7 in 1990 to 20.8 in 2019. Now this is a pre-pandemic figure. The COVID-19 crisis has undoubtedly made this worse. And we do have reports coming in about how this has put stressors. Our experts have talked about it. So we need to look at addressing this in a more sustained way, and not just as a counseling approach or as a knee-jerk, but make significant investments in it. Before we go into discussing that, I have another poll question which I'd like to throw open to the participants, which is, what do we understand by a psychosocial approach to understanding mental health? We have the poll question will come up. We have options. I'd like you all to take a look at this and share your feedback. What do you feel is a psychosocial approach to understanding mental health? While we get the answers to that, Neeta, I'd like to throw open the next question to you. Since we're looking to build a systematic, a sustained approach, what are the strategies that Sneha has used, which have worked really well? And how would you continue to build capacities to keep mental health in the mainstream conversation?
I think it is also important when we are working as an NGO in the communities. It is also important the major partners are the public health systems, or the other systems like ICDS, police, in order to take care of the mental health and the emotional well-being of our adolescents and youth, especially because we are working towards that. So I think what I feel, Shai, is that the capacitated workforce of our frontline workers, how they are doing work for the physical health, like TB, malaria, whatever, it is important that the mental health is integrated with them, and they are able to really work towards preventive, promotive, and curative strategies for mental health is something that is very, very important for them. At the same time, as I said, we really need to have a cadre of community volunteers who, like how they are working towards different issues of gender-based violence, physical health, and everything. They also we really need to create this cadre of community volunteers who are capacitated with the mental health inputs, and they are able to work towards the cause of mental health. Thirdly, I think the Rashtriya Kishore Swasthya Karyakram, as a part of the RMNCH plus A services, the program that the government of India has launched in 2014, talks about establishing adolescent-friendly health clinics across all three levels of public health care. It is important that the mental health is effectively integrated with these adolescent-friendly health cares, so that the adolescents who know that there is an issue with me, they know that either they can go to the health post or to a tertiary hospital to understand and take help from a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist. So that is extremely important. I think what Saisha said in terms of integrating mental health in all these spheres is equally important. And I would like to reiterate the WHO's tagline that mental health care for all, let's make a priority, I think is something that we really need to keep our focus into when we are doing our other work also.
So in fact, if I could go back to that poll question, 50% have said it's all of the above. It's really a combination of all of the three, which is a psychosocial approach involves assessing the effects of stressors on mental health, includes understanding psychological and social factors on mental well-being. It's an understanding of the physical factors in mental health. And all of these really go into understanding that those are important, actually, quite very, very insightful sort of answers. Gracie, to build on what Neeta said, Costone has had very successful interventions done in partnership with the government. Do you also feel that working with the government is key really to build or to, to bring in this sort of sustained approach to promote mental well-being?
Yeah, definitely. I think our experiences so far has been that it's very, very important to work closely with the government. And in fact, the pandemic has given us an opportunity, because governments have really now seen the importance of building skills among young people to deal with stress and to cope with stress. And that's what I think that has, in our work now, like we already were working with the government to scale up the program, but now we find there's a lot more enthusiasm about the program, and we hope that we can take this promotive mental health program to a number of schools across Bihar and across other states in this country.
Saisha, could you talk about the cross-cutting benefits of this integrated approach that everyone is actually talking about? How have you seen it playing out in many of your programs? Could you share some examples, in fact, or where you feel, particularly after the pandemic, this has really worked in a very beneficial way?
Certainly. So I think it's been sort of long established that living with mental health concerns has impacts on accessing various rights, your safety, autonomy. The relationship is also bidirectional. So increasing access to basic rights, resources, and services, especially for marginalized groups, will also have an impact on mental health and must also be considered as preventive and promotive mental health work, as much as we consider individual level preventative work. So an example of this from an MHI partner, Shiver, which works on the issue of farmer deaths by suicide in drought-affected Maharashtra, is they look at the connection between the education of young people, their caregivers' livelihoods, and the mental health of the young people, as well as the farmer families, adults as well. So part of the intervention to break the cycles of sort of debt and distress amongst farmer families is to facilitate government entitlements for education of children bereaved by suicide of a parent, livelihood supports for spouses bereaved with suicide, and in addition, they are, of course, simultaneously providing psychological first aid and counseling services. I think as many young people were experiencing distress of disrupted education, disrupted employment, having these sort of community oriented interventions in place, having those interventions that can then further link and address certain causes of distress that have been exacerbated by the pandemic, but did of course exist prior to this pandemic, has been a great source of access, I think.
रवीना, आप बताएंगे, मतलब आप कम्युनिटी में हैं, आपको क्या लगता है अगर हम सोचें कि हमेशा ये जो हम मानसिक मेंटल हेल्थ या मेंटल स्ट्रेंथ, मेंटल वेलबीइंग की जो बात कर रहे हैं, उसे बनाए रखने के लिए अपनी कम्युनिटी को ही देख के बताएंगे, आप क्या सोचते हैं कि क्या करना चाहिए एक तरह से हमेशा के लिए? ये नहीं कि कुछ हो गया तो हम आ गए वहां पे एक प्रोग्राम लेके, लेकिन एक 24/7 कंटिन्यूड बेसिस पे किस तरह के प्रोग्राम्स हैं जिनका अच्छा असर हो सकता है खासकर यूथ पे?
कम्युनिटी में हम अगर मेंटल हेल्थ के ऊपर काम करना चाहिए या फिर वहाँ की मेंटलिटी अगर जागरूकता लाना है, तो हमें जन जागृति कार्यक्रम अभियान करना चाहिए। नहीं कि हम साल में सिर्फ एक ही बार वो दिन बनाए और फिर भूल जाए। जिस तरह हम जेंडर बेस्ड वायलेंस पे आज काम कर रहे हैं, अलग अलग पोस्टर्स बना रहे, पेंटिंग्स बना रहे, उसी तरह मेंटल हेल्थ के ऊपर भी हमें काम करना चाहिए। ऑल पेंटिंग्स करना चाहिए। अब बच्चों के लिए अगर हम मदरसा है, मंदिर है, बौद्ध विहार, वहां पे अगर कुछ मटेरियल रखते हैं या फिर कोई पोस्टर्स लगाते हैं, तो वो बस्ती में हमेशा रहेगा। उससे वो अवेयरनेस ज्यादा बढ़ सकती है। जो लोगों के बीच में तो थी मेंटेलिटी है कि ये पागल है, ये सब चीजें, तो मेंटल हेल्थ को लेके वो कम करने के लिए अगर हम जिस तरह से हम अभी गेम खिलाते हैं पेरेंट्स को कि उसको लूडो गेम किस तरह अगर वो खिला के उनमें से उनका जो भी उनके थिंक है कि वो कम करने की कोशिश करे, तो हो सकता है हम थोड़ा सा बस्ती में अवेयरनेस ला सकते हैं। जो उनकी मिथ है उसको उसमें से निकाल सकते, बाहर निकाल सकते।
Ravina talks about actually a very important aspect, which remains a significant barrier, and that's stigma and how to address that. And she talks about community awareness programs, using games, using some recreational approaches in a sense to encourage, to break these barriers, to address these barriers, encourage people to speak up. Neeta and Gracie, I'd like to ask you, both of you, if I could ask you, Neeta, what are some of the effective interventions Sneha has used to address stigma, which remains a major barrier? It's for people to seek. In fact, there was a recent UNICEF study which said that youth in India don't believe that they should seek support for any mental health issues, which is really quite worrying. So, how does one overcome those? About talking about anxiety or talking about something that's a persistent problem.
So we have done structured mental health screening with all the adolescents who are part of it, who are part of our cohort. And when we get some of the red flags which are identified, and the mental health screening has an established tools. When we identify that there is an issue with the child, some mental health issue with the child, it is important, our most important learning that when you are working with the child, providing the psychosocial support, counseling, therapeutic support, it is equally important to work with his or her ecosystem, and it includes parents, teachers, their health workers, their neighbors, their friends, peers. So many times our clinical psychologists, for one case, they must have spoken to at least sometimes 5 to 7 people in order to understand what is the issue with that child and how that ecosystem can nurture the mental health of this child as such. Secondly, as Ravina mentioned, I think it is important to do a community-based campaigns with the help of different creative ways of using games in order to break myths, using poster paintings, using wall paintings, and doing a wall painting and then doing a dialogue with the community residents in terms of how it is important to understand that mental health is as important as physical health, that how you get fever, similarly you may get some kind of a mental health issue. It has to be looked upon as naturally as possible. So that is what we try to do it with our community campaigns, with our individual and family and the group level interventions.
I'd like to take in a question from one of our participants, Aruna Raman, and I'd like to ask all of you, starting with you, Gracie, what are the thoughts of the panelists? This is what Aruna is asking. What are the thoughts of the panelists on integrating mental health interventions into primary healthcare in terms of effects, policies, opportunities, and challenges? Interesting question, Gracie. Would you take a go at this?
Yeah, of course. I strongly believe that yes, we can integrate mental health services within the primary care, but we have to be very, very careful in how we do it, because when you use screening instruments, you'll have a lot of people coming under the radar saying they're depressed or anxious, and therefore we shouldn't be actually giving medications, through the primary care. So the way I look at mental health is, and I think one of the participants also has written a question that it doesn't exist in a vacuum. There are so many other factors that are there. Even if you look at the Lancet report, it talks about, like in India, the risk factors are so very different. Like the risk factors are not just disorders. Risk factors are, cultural factors, caste discrimination, etc. And therefore, when we take it to primary care, we have to kind of be careful about creating awareness about mental health in a very different way, from a well-being perspective, where you actually make people believe and understand that mental health is everybody's business. We all have stress. Everybody, and mental health it's a continuum from well-being to being dysfunctional. And only when you cannot cope, you reach dysfunction, you need this specific individual services. So I think when we go to primary care and take it to that, we have to be very careful about it.
What would you say, Saisha, to that? How would you respond to Aruna's question?
I think I would just agree with what Gracie has said there, that I think there are a lot of the way the mental health frameworks have been developed and the mainstream understanding of mental health of more biomedical or more individual focused interventions does put us at risk of not being able to account for the discriminations that occur in the world that will have an impact on people's mental health, and the discriminations that are then sort of reinvented and regurgitated in the actual mental health practice, right? So those are concerns I think we have to have in any intervention, whether it is public or private, right? Mental health interventions, whether it's public or private. And I think we have really strong policies, we have strong frameworks in our policies to do a lot more in mental health in India. And I think it's about being able to build that kind of a movement and know exactly how it is that we're going to go ahead and make it more accessible and more
inclusive and
inclusive and also I think just a wider conversation here. Yeah.
Neeta, what would you say to this question?
So I think first of all, I would like to focus on the work that we have done on intersections of gender-based violence and mental health. That is something extremely important for women and girls. What we have seen is it is important to involve the public health system aggressively if we want to deal with the issues of gender-based violence, because that is where the women or girls, whoever, a rape survivor or a sexual assault survivor or a domestic violence survivor will go first to repair her medical injury or whatever. So it is important that the public healthcare staff across all levels are trained in identification of and doing the probing of whatever has happened, why would that injury have taken place on her, and simultaneously having the mental health care support and working with the psychiatry departments of medical colleges is extremely important, where we are able to provide services for these women under one shelter. So there is this concept of one-stop crisis center which have started across all cities, but it has not really percolated down to the districts and the rural areas. So it is important that the rural hospitals, all the district hospitals have this one-stop crisis center with them. Secondly, as I mentioned, I think the Rashtriya Kishor Swasthya Karyakram definitely talks about mental health, integrating mental health into their agenda. And we really need to see to it that the adolescent-friendly health clinics are established and the mental health care provision services are available for the adolescents for taking care of their own emotional and mental health and well-being. So at the primary level, I think Aruna ma'am has asked about the primary level. It is important to integrate the convergence with ICDS, health post, initiatives like Sabla training and initiatives like, the health post is also supposed to conduct health education on mental health. So something like that really need to be put upon under adolescent friendly health clinics, at least for the adolescent girls and boys. If we can start that, it is important. At the community level, I really feel that the primary healthcare centers are really responsible for addressing these issues with boys as well as with girls, because it is intervention with girls is not really going to be in isolation. It is important that you work with the boys and men and understand their understanding of patriarchy, and how to break that notions of patriarchy is extremely important. So working with boys, and also I think making them understand that mental health can be also their issue, because many times the gender connotations are that, you know, the boys and the men are
Strong and tough.
strong. They do not have any mental health issues. So I think we really need to break those gender stereotypes and really work towards that. I think NGOs like us have a big role to play along with the public health systems for that.
Thank you, all of you. Aruna, Raman, I hope that answers your question. If you have any additional ones, I'll be happy to ask them. Gracie, coming back to you, Inessa, how do you've talked about promoting mental health, mental well-being, and not, making it a broader focus really, and not making this a knee-jerk counseling, therapy kind of an approach. How does one do that? How do you foster that conversation? We are perhaps poised at a very important point now, and people are perhaps willing to listen. Authorities are paying attention to this. How does one foster that awareness? How do you take the conversation beyond counseling, therapy? In some ways also promotes and further, I suppose, propagates the stigma, isn't it? Seen as a problem. Someone has a problem and so they're going to somebody. How do you do that? Do you go to schools? How does one do that?
So, as I said earlier, we know that mental health doesn't exist in a vacuum. As I said earlier, it is, it's intersectorial. It is related to so many issues. So we have to change the narrative around mental health. First of all, we have to bring the well-being perspective. As I said earlier, it's everybody's business. So when you talk about mental health from a well-being perspective, that we all need certain skills and support. Or even young people, they learn that they need to support each other and to learn the skills to be able to cope. And they look at it from that perspective. Then we're changing the narrative around mental health, and therefore we will also be we will be impacting how stigma plays a role. So once we do that, and I'm saying that right now, if you start talking about mental health, most people think about depression. Most people think about suicide. So if we have to think about it as from a much broader perspective, and therefore campaigns and awareness has to be built. Like Nita was saying, even within the primary care, even within the medical fraternity or any other workplace, we have to change that narrative. We have to create a larger awareness about mental health. And that would help us. And I'm not saying that we do need these counseling services, but if we change the narrative and create awareness and build on promotive and preventive mental health programs, then people will realize that very few people really need individual services. It's only when there is dysfunction that you need the individual services. And people will learn that if they support each other and help each other to deal with stress, then they can get out of it. So in this way, we are not only dealing with the stigma, but we're changing the narrative and creating a kind of a broader awareness about mental health.
थैंक यू ग्रेसी। रवीना, मैं आपसे पूछना चाहूंगी, जैसे नीता बता रही थी कि कम्युनिटी पे एक प्रेशर रहता है कि मर्द जो हैं, लड़के जो हैं स्ट्रॉन्ग हैं, इनको मेंटल हेल्थ इश्यूज नहीं है, या इनको कुछ एंजाइटी नहीं है, या डर नहीं है, ये सब लड़कियों मतलब ये महिलाओं का प्रॉब्लम है। क्या ये सोच बदल रहा है कोविड के बाद, खासकर जब हर घर में एक तरह से परेशानी है, सब लोग परेशान हैं नौकरी को लेके या जो भी है, बीमारी को लेके? क्या ये जो सोच है इसमें आप कुछ बदलाव देखती हैं? क्या लोग ज्यादा बात कर रहे हैं अभी मेंटल हेल्थ के बारे में, या बता रहे हैं एक दूसरे को, हाँ मुझे डर लग रहा है या मुझे इसके बारे में चिंता है? लड़के खासकर।
लड़के भी बता रहे हैं और मेल्स पर्सन है वो भी बता रहे, क्योंकि अभी सबकी नौकरी जाने की वजह से बहुत सारे घर में जो इश्यू हो रहे हैं, तो उसके से मेंटली तो उन लोग भी डिस्टर्ब हो गए, तो उन्हें ऐसा लग रहा है कि मेरा एजुकेशन कैसा कंप्लीट होगा, बच्चों को लग रहा है लड़कों आगे जाके क्या कर सकता हूँ मैं। अभी जो कोविड के एग्जाम हो गए, कोविड में जो एग्जाम हुए बच्चों को, तो उसपे जो स्टैम्प लगा उसकी वजह से मेरा भविष्य में क्या होगा, ये सब छोटी छोटी चीजों से बच्चे परेशान हैं। तो बदलाव लग रहा है, उन लोग खुल के बात कर रहे हैं कि नहीं मुझे भी किसी की जरूरत है हेल्थ की, या मुझे सपोर्ट की जरूरत है मेंटल हेल्थ के बारे में। जो हम लोग स्क्रीनिंग भी कर रहे हैं, तो उसमें भी लड़कों भी रेड फ्लैग्स में आ रहे हैं।
Ravina is in fact saying that the lockdown and in a sense the larger insecurity and fears and the common experiences, really everybody's experienced the same impact, job losses, cut off from education, has made mental health a more it's more of a conversation, a larger conversation in the community, particularly among boys, which is encouraging given that they're traditionally meant to be tough and not speak about these things. There's a question which has come from Dominic Breen to Neeta, which is that Neeta said that working with the ecosystem of the young person is important. Do you feel that the education system, from the Department of Education right down to individual schools, will implement the announced mental health initiatives, or will the examination pressures preclude any genuine efforts to train all teachers to value the mental health of their pupils? Sorry.
Yeah. So I think there is a school mental health, the school health initiatives, especially in Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai, or even in other municipalities, at least in the urban areas I can think of. The Education Department and the Public Health Department has the joint initiative called School Health Intervention. What we are trying to do with our interventions is that do the school health intervention in terms of anemia screening, mental health, the health checkups and everything. Also integrate something called mental health screening with this school health initiatives. So that is something we are trying it out in one of our areas. I'm not saying that we have been able to really successfully do it, but I think these are the baby steps that we are taking, and it is important to get the municipal corporation, both the departments together to work on this. And it is possible. It is not that it is not possible. We really need to focus on that. Secondly, as Dominic has said, I think investing our efforts into capacity building of teachers is extremely important, and we are also trying to do it through some of our schools, and that has given us good results. So building the capacity of teachers in terms of understanding emotional stress that children have, understanding the mental health issues, I think that really will give us good results if we continue to work with the Public Health Department and the Education Department together.
रवीना, आपने मतलब कम्युनिटी के एक्सपीरियंसेस के बारे में आपने इतने अच्छे हमें इनपुट्स दिए। ये बताइए कि आपको लगता है कि स्कूलों में, खासकर मुंबई में अगर आप देखें बीएमसी स्कूलों में, अगर हम इस मतलब एजुकेशन सिस्टम में इसके बारे में बात करें, मेंटल वेलबींग के बारे में, सिस्टम के बारे में, क्या उससे बदलाव आ सकता है, थोड़ा सा और ओपननेस आ सकता है इस विषय को लेके?
स्कूल में अगर हम लोग इस विषय को लेके बात करेंगे तो थोड़ा बदलाव आ सकता है, क्योंकि टीचर्स को ज्यादा इन्वॉल्व पेरेंट्स ज्यादा मानते हैं। हम कितना भी कम्युनिटी में एनजीओ जाए या अदर कोई संस्था जाती है तो उतना ध्यान नहीं देते, मगर स्कूल के टीचर्स का अगर हम कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग बढ़ाएं, इमोशनल्स के बारे में ज्यादा करें, स्कूल में अगर हम सेशंस करते हैं ज्यादा बच्चों के साथ तो कवरेज ज्यादा रहता है, तो उसका असर ज्यादा हो सकता है। और बस्ती में भी अगर हम उस तरह से ज्यादा अवेयरनेस के प्रोग्राम करें, मुझे लग रहा है कि हम लोग रैली है या स्ट्रीट प्ले है, पोस्टर पेंटिंग, एक करने की वजह से ज्यादा इफेक्ट हो सकता है।
ये बताइए, जब बच्चे लेकिन आजकल इन चीजों के बारे में बात करते हैं, डर लगने के बारे में या एंजाइटी के बारे में, माँ बाप उनके माता पिता कैसे रिएक्ट करते हैं? मतलब क्या अभी वो ज्यादा समझ है इन चीजों के बारे में, या एक तरह से उसमें कुछ ज्यादा सेंसिटाइजेशन आना है?
अभी उन्हें समझ लाना बहुत जरूरी है। अभी भी उनको नहीं लग रहा है कि एक अगर बच्चे को लग रहा है, हमें बच्चे को समझ में आ रहा है, बच्चा हमारे साथ में शेयर कर रहा है, तो पेरेंट्स को ये पता नहीं होता कि हमारे साथ में क्या शेयर कर रहा है। तो उनको समझाना पड़ रहा है कि बच्चों को दिक्कत है, पढ़ाई को लेकर हो या अपने कोई और फ्रेंड्स के बारे में हो, किस चीज नशे के बारे में हो। अगर बच्चा उस तरह से मेंटली डिस्टर्ब है तो वो हमें जितना बताता है वो पेरेंट्स को नहीं बता पा रहे, तो ज्यादा हम पे विश्वास ज्यादा रखता है बच्चा।
So as Ravina says, it must be made a part of the school curriculum because she feels that parents look up to teachers, value what educators say about these things, and therefore that is really needed to initiate a larger attitudinal change. And currently, as of now, parents are yet to really be sensitized to the mental health pressures their children face. And so this is a gap that still persists. Since we are talking about ways to promote mental well-being, thank you to all the participants. I wanted to ask all of you who are with us today on the webinar, what can we all do individually to promote awareness of mental health, mental well-being in our capacities? If you could type your answers in the chat window, that would be great. Individually in our own personal capacities, regardless of whether we work in this field, we are students, teachers, what are some of the steps we could take? And while we get the answers, in fact, I'd like to ask you, all of you, Saisha, Neeta, Gracie, and Ravina. Saisha, what have you seen in the larger communities you work with? What are some of the things people have done, ordinary people, that have really made a difference? Who have been some of the most effective ambassadors, in a sense, of this?
So I think a lot of what we owe as a mental health sector is to user survivor movements, to caregiver movements, people who have lived through mental health concerns and their caregivers advocating for themselves and for their peers. And I think those have been, the foundation of a lot of mental health work that happens today, and they continue to advocate for themselves and for user survivors at large. And I think that has been a powerful thing to see across the work that we do, and also to look at lived experience that is intersectional, right? So look at lived experience of marginalizations and the mental health distress that is unique to the way you have experienced life. And so people who have really taken it on to speak from their experiences and from what their needs are and advocate on that front with mental health institutions, with other sectors as well, and to realize the change that they were hoping to see.
So Shreya has shared her input, which is that there's a need for awareness and work around community mental health models. As an individual, being conscious and trying to be a part of such a community that contributes to a safe space. She calls it a broad outlook, but this needs attention. I think that's a very good input. I encourage all of you to please share your ideas. Neeta, what do you think? How can we, as out of the expert, in our individual homes, in our lives, what can we do to promote this feeling of mental well-being? Is it the words we use? Is it the terminology? Is it the, what is it that we can all do?
I think, first of all, understanding that physical health and mental health are similar is something that is extremely important for all of us. Even in a middle class or a upper middle class society, the mental health is looked upon as someone with a stigma, or people don't want to share that, this person is undergoing some kind of a therapy, some kind of the psychosocial support or whatever. So, and that I think disables people to take appropriate support and required kind of intervention that is needed. So first of all, I think it is important to break those myths and the stigma around that. So at a larger level, at a societal level, the campaigns are necessary, not necessarily on the World Mental Health Day, but across all the years, whenever we have the opportunities of talking about campaign on gender-based violence, so why can't we integrate mental health into that? When we have the aspect of World Health Day, why can't we kind of integrate mental health? There is a World AIDS Day on 1st of December. AIDS and mental health goes hand in hand. There are so many things. Yeah, there are so many aspects of the deceased condition, and otherwise also in general, the mental health is a part of it, and we really need to make it as a focus for across all our initiatives that we do.
There's a very interesting point made by Aruna Raman, which I wanted to actually ask you also, Gracie. What she says paraskilling is important. People with lived experiences or experts by experience can be upskilled to provide the first level of support to communities in unique settings. This can also help alleviate the immense burden of care that a strained mental health care system faces in our country. Do you agree with that? Do you think there is a need?
Yes.
To Gracie, how would you respond? Is that an approach, in fact, that you've seen adopted in anywhere else in any other part of the world, and how does that work?
Definitely, I think it's an approach when you actually it's a very inclusive approach where people with lived experience actually support others, and this I have even seen in the Buran's program, community mental health program that have been happening, where young people who have mental disorders are actually brought into the mainstream, and they kind of create awareness. So that is an approach that will work. Yeah, and I think within when we say communities, I think teachers also play, like we said, teachers play a very, very important role. And if in our own experience, we've seen that when teachers are trained in resilience programs, they actually talk about it, and they talk about how to enhance one's well-being. So they do play a large role. But as we heard earlier, parents are the ones that are not aware, and they should be aware of how to get these conversations in the home.
Yeah, in fact, talking about the home, Kalpana Trivedi makes an interesting point. I think each of us can start making a difference in our own homes when you have children of both genders, as unconsciously, and we do differentiate, which is so true. I mean, I think this is something that cuts across many economic strata, that there is a difference that comes into play in many families. Amita Arya says, to widen the base, to widen the reach, we need to focus on training of social workers and members of various NGOs working with the community on understanding mental health wellness and ability to manage minor psychosocial issues and do the right referrals. Sneha, in fact, Neeta, you've had that approach, isn't it? That you have trained your community workers. I mean, in all three organizations, in fact, that you've trained people in the community to understand and respond to early signs or, indications that somebody might need support of a slightly more, of a higher grade. Has that helped? Because you have someone who speaks your language, who lives in your midst, who responds, who understands your pressure very differently than someone else who doesn't live there. That must be very effective.
Yes, I think developing this cadre is something that we are doing right now, and we are also been able to really identify the trusted individuals. You also need to have the cadre of trusted individuals. Otherwise, there is no point of doing it with anybody and everybody. So the cadre of trusted individuals need to be chosen appropriately, and then they can be trained in terms of. So the cadre of trusted individual will also include your Anganwadi worker, your community health volunteer, because otherwise, anyway, she is coming to your door for giving IFA tablet, or if you're giving condoms and those kind of things. So it is important that this, if they talk about it from a mental health perspective, it will be highly respected, because they are the respected figures in the community. So I think that really helps, and that needs to be, we have taken baby steps into doing that, and we really want to build our model onto that in terms of creating this cadre of barefoot counselors, or the non-specialist workers as we call them.
Awareness programs in schools and community. This is from Vinita Birla. Connecting children and with phone and parents will help understand that mental health is very important for all. So obviously parents are a big, are key to this awareness, and that is something that everyone agrees with. Dominic Breen says, by not elevating academic, physical skills, etc., above emotional skills, very important. How we speak of each other and our valuable place in society is important. This is very true. Gracie, would you agree? I see you nodding your head. What do you think, that academic, physical skills are sort of given this larger than life role, maybe, that is not terribly fair?
Yeah, in fact, when we do our programs in schools and we start our programs, neither the teachers nor the students even have a vocabulary for emotions. So we have to start off with giving them that vocabulary, and then teaching them how to regulate their emotions, how to deal with difficult emotions, how to look at resources and strengths within them. So definitely, I think it's very important for us to to kind of highlight these aspects in children's lives, in schools, in institutions. And I think it is something that should go across a life course, from primary school to you know, higher education. So yeah.
One important question that's come from Bhakti Ghatole, and I'd like to ask Neeta that, which is that how girls with disabilities received mental health during the pandemic? Is this something, I mean, disability is not a specific area of focus, but since they are part of the community, have their needs been, do you feel, addressed enough during the pandemic? And
actually, we have not really worked proactively on the disability, but in case if there are cases that we address, that we get it, we work closely with the public healthcare system. So we see to it that the appropriate support is provided to such kind of cases, and we encourage people to take support from the public healthcare system. So we have not really come across as a case from a disability point of view, but in case if we do, during the pandemic, definitely we have not got anything like that. But in case if we do, we definitely refer them to this thing. If you're talking about physical disabilities, yes, we have not really worked on it, right. But there are a lot of cases where the learning disabilities were identified during the pandemic also, and after our mental health screening also talks or identifies the issues with the learnings, you know, that if they are not able to really study properly, concepts understanding and everything, so the learning disability issue, and then that really breaks down the confidence of the child with his peers, with his or her peers, with parents get irritated that the child is not able to study. So that I think effectively worked with our counselors and the clinical psychologists, with the parents as well as with the child, with an appropriate plan that we need to do. We also refer them for the IQ testing and everything to the psychiatry departments and work with the psychiatry department effectively. So it is important that the team of the clinical psychologist, counselor and the psychiatrist works for these children.
So Jaya has said something which I think is important, which is that the language we use when we talk about mental health. She says we often hear he or she is depressed and anxious, schizophrenic. If we could help people know that mental health is a condition the person has, that the person is not the disease. Saisha, do you agree? Do you think a lot of the terminology around it and the words we use to dismiss it in the communities is a big deterrent to seeking help, to even talking about it?
Absolutely. And I think one action that we all can also take is, as my co-panelists have already mentioned multiple times today, start reframing these conversations to be about how everyone has mental health, right? And really try and think about mental health beyond what we have been taught and what has been stigmatized as just conditions and this, that, and the other, that all the stigma that surrounds most conversations on mental health, and really broaden it to ask people, you know, I'm sure you have felt stressed at some point in these 2 years, and there will be varying degrees of that stress, but yeah.
So Gracie, to come to you for, you know, to in a sense to sum up, so do you feel we are today poised at a really good moment? Yes, we're staring at a variant which may derail our lives yet again. And there is uncertainty about children going back to school, when our children will get vaccinated. But do you feel positive or encouraged by the conversations people are having? And not just on social media, which is a sort of a, you know, a select space, which is a different world, but in general on the ground, do you feel the time is right to look at, doing the kind of interventions, the significant interventions, the investments that frankly have been lacking all this while?
Yeah, actually, I feel very encouraged when I see and hear, and especially panelists that I have on this panel of friends who speak about the perspective that I've been talking for some time in a vacuum, but now I find that a lot more people are talking about promotive mental health, preventive mental health, the importance of this, integrating it within other aspects of health. So these are conversations you hear. And even policymakers and officials, even in our work in Bihar, we find that there is this eagerness to kind of understand how these programs can be integrated within the school system. So you find, and I think this is really a great opportunity for all of us to bring mental health on center stage, but bring it with a better perspective, a broader perspective.
Is there any, okay, there's one question which has come about any social strata, it needs a really quick answer, that triggers mental health issues. Do we have time for this? Yes, we do. Is there any particular strata condition that triggers more mental health issues? Is there, is there any particular strata which is more susceptible to it? Is there any evidence of this, Saisha?
So I wouldn't say that it's an issue of susceptibility due to your social strata that you belong to, but it's very well documented that the discrimination you face and exclusion that you would face as a marginalized person, be it caste, ability, gender, various social locations that we all live in, will have an impact on your mental health and well-being. Therefore, it is important that we take these considerations and look at these systems that cause distress also as within the purview of our mental health work.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you all for participating. I want to put out one message, which is that if any of you need any help, or you know of anyone who needs help, please do reach out. You can write to rama.sham@snehamumbai.org and gracie@causestone.org. If you know anybody in distress or someone who's facing any issues with coping, or if you need help yourself, do reach out, do ask for that help. Don't hesitate. I'd also like to say that we have another webinar coming up very soon, looking at the needs of another equally vulnerable group. We keep you posted about that. So thank you for joining in. Thank you for your feedback. And a big thank you to all our panelists as well.
Toby, please stop recording.